Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I'm sure most of you all are using techniques such as drop shotting, where it requires you to connect a fluorocarbon leader to braid. If you've done any searching on the internet, you'll see that there's two primary knots that people are using these days, one being the FG knot and the other being the crazy Alberto knot. If you look at one video, they'll tell you the FG knot's the best. You look at another video, they'll tell you, hey, I'm using the crazy Alberto knot. They don't really go into a whole lot of discussions or reason why. So we're going to take a few minutes. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of both knots. We're going to tie both knots so you can get a quick example. It won't be the greatest tutorial on knot tying, simply because the lighting in here isn't that great. And I don't have really good material to do a really good demonstration. You will be able to see and get the basic idea, and maybe it'll be enough. But we're going to move on here, and we're going to tie a couple knots. We'll take a look at them. We'll talk about them. Okay, so we're going to start off here. We're going to tie both knots. We're going to start with the FG knot. It won't be a great knot tutorial simply because I'm using actual line, 10-pound braid to 8-pound copolymer fluorocarbon, but it'll give you the basic idea. If you choose one knot over the other, you can always do a tutorial. The Alberto knot is pretty easy. You should be able to see it pretty well. They're both actually pretty easy. This one's just a little more, takes a little more finesse and definitely more time. But what I do is I start out with my braid and I tie a loop knot. I use a bowline so that when I'm done, I can slide this knot out of my way, and you'll see what I mean, what I mean here in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply lay my monofilament or fluorocarbon over top. I'm always going to do my first wrap towards me, and then I'll do a wrap away, and then a wrap towards me, and a wrap away. And we're going to continue this pattern till we get somewhere between 17 and 20 total wraps. So we'll start counting here. That's 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Now if you're having troubles tying this knot, remember you have to keep tension on both lines. 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16. And we're going to stop there because we know we had 2 in the beginning. So that's 18 on each side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my main line and my fluoro tag in. I'm going to pinch them together. I'm going to take my finger out of the loop here if I can get it out. And then what I do is I just typically just pull that loop just like so. Then I'm going to take this tag in and I'm going to tie a simple half hitch. And all a half hitch is over and back through itself. Once I have that, we snug that down. Now I can tighten everything up, cinch everything good and tight. Now once I've done that, typically what they recommend is you tie another 2 or 3 half hitches, or a lot of guys like to reverse the half hitch, then in turn actually making it a square knot. But we're just going to tie 2 quick half hitches here and call it a day for this particular purpose. Well, I got carried away with tightening that one, and we actually ended up down below the knot, which isn't a big deal. You just pull it out. Oh, no, I didn't. That was just smothered. Yes, I did. So, all right, so we ended up with 2 half hitches. I didn't feel like monkeying with it, but it's good and tight. We're going to trim off both of our tag lines, and you can trim these really close. However, on the FG knot, because you've just used two or three, 4 simple half hitches to terminate the knot, what I've found that happens with time, and you know, it all depends on how long you'll use a leader before retying, but what happens is, as this knot is passing through the guides, as this knot is passing through the guides, it's constantly hitting the guides, and eventually this knot will work, this lockdown knot, which again is a half hitch, will work its way loose, and once it does, the whole knot will unravel. Now, if that doesn't happen, this knot will stay strong and it'll hold up virtually forever. It's very, very strong. There's no denying the strength of this knot. It's a thin diameter knot, but it's a long knot. The longer the knot, the more chance it has of, you know, coming in contact with one of the guides when you're casting it. So now we're going to go ahead and just trim this off the line and move on. All right, so now we've tied our FG, we've trimmed it up. I have it laying on the counter over there so that we can compare the 2 knots afterwards. Now I'm going to tie the Alberto knot. The Alberto knot, some call it the crazy Alberto knot. There's a few other names for it, but this knot, you don't have to do anything special. You don't have to keep tension on either line. Always start with the braid in your right hand, mono or fluoro in your left. What I do is I lay the braid on, or the mono on top. I pinch the 2, and I pull enough slack and double that over, and I hold that. Usually I wrap it between the 2 fingers there. So now I have a loop, and I have the braid is up between the loop. Very, very simple. So now I just reach under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 twists. And at this point, I'm going to just pinch it. I'm going to go back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is the important part. I don't know if you can see it or not, but my line goes down through from the top. So I want to make sure that this one goes down through the top. So if the rabbit comes up out of the hole, he goes back down in the hole the way he came. Now I'll pull it just a little bit, and you'll see everything's kind of starting to mesh together. When I get, excuse me, when I get to this point, I wet the knot. And when I take tension on the knot, I like to grab the tag end here with my teeth. And I pull everything together. I just put a little bit of tension on that tag end, and it keeps any loops from forming. Pull everything tight. We're done. We'll trim this up, and then we'll compare the 2 knots, and we'll talk about some of the other differences. So now, here you can see I've laid out both knots on the table here. I'm trying to put them on a darker background. The one closest to me, the longer knot, is the FG. The one away from it is the Alberto knot. Notice, and I didn't trim them as close as you can. You can trim them as close as you possibly can, but again, as I said earlier, the problem with the FG knot, it's a longer knot, obviously giving it more opportunities to come into contact with the guides. And what happens over time as it's hitting the guides, your lockdown knots here, or your half hitches, will tend to work loose with time, and eventually, if you're not checking it, keeping an eye on it, if you notice that tag has suddenly grown a little bit longer, it's not super noticeable, but a little bit longer, it's probably time to tie on a whole new leader. With the Alberto knot, it's a short knot. It seems to make less contact with the guides coming out. Um, I don't really notice a difference between the diameter of the knots. If there is, it's very minuscule. But the Alberto being shorter and equally small diameter, it tends to come into contact less often with the guides. This knot seems to hold up for me all day long with no issues. I can tie it in literally a matter of a couple seconds. Whereas the FG knot, I'm usually fighting, getting tangled up. The rod gets tangled up, trying to maintain tension on it. My foot slips off of the other line and I lose tension. It's a frustrating knot to tie. There have been some claims on the internet that this knot is supposed to be stronger. However, most of the claims, when they claim the FG knot is 30% stronger, they're saying on average over all other mono to braid knots. I have personally tested these knots. The difference is negligible, if any at all. I have never broken a fish off at the knot with an Alberto knot. I have lost a few fish with the FG knot, not because the knot itself broke, but because the half hitch came undone and then the other half hitch came undone, so on and so forth. And that was actually on a rod that I was doing repetitive long cast, throwing a spy bait. Typically with a drop shot, you don't have as many issues. You're just kind of pitching it out there in front of you. You're not loading the rod up and, making that heave-ho cast. Just my 2 cents, but I think both knots are equally as strong. I can tie the Alberto in less than a quarter of the time. And I practiced the FG knot quite a bit. I got pretty quick at it there for a while, the first couple years when I was using it. But since then, I have gravitated towards the FG knot. One other thing about, the Alberto knot. One other thing about the Alberto knot, you'll see a lot of tutorials. The pros are using one of these 2 knots. You won't see them using anything else, at least not that I've seen. One of the other things I can tell you about the Alberto knot is you'll see a lot of tutorials where guys are wrapping this knot 7, 8, 10, 11 times. There's no need for it. 5 wraps, 5 good solid wraps in each direction, and that knot will never slip. Saves you time and gives you a smaller profile knot. Again, this is just my 2 cents. Try it out for yourself. So, in conclusion, just a quick recap here. Some of the pros and cons. What we saw with the Alberto knot, it's definitely a lot easier and a lot faster to tie, which is going to save you time, during a tournament. And we also noticed that the Alberto knot is definitely a smaller profile knot. Again, not allowing it to make as much contact with the guides coming out, and it doesn't have the tendency after a day of fishing to unravel. Remember with the FG knot, it's a lot longer. It hits the guides a lot more frequently, in my opinion, and eventually, after hitting those guides repetitive times, especially with like load casting, like if you're bomb casting a spy bait or something like that, eventually that cinch knot or that half hitch or the multiple half hitches you're using, they're going to start to come undone. Once they do, that whole knot will just unravel, and that's the end of the day. I will say, typically, the first time it happened to me, I probably fished 3 days with the same leader, and it was just fun fishing, practicing around. But I have had it happen as quick as within a half a day, and again, that was practicing. So in conclusion, my opinion and the opinion of many other touring pros out there is the Alberto knot is a much more efficient, much more reliable knot. Thanks for watching. So in conclusion, just a quick recap here. Some of the pros and cons. What we saw with the Alberto knot, it's definitely a lot easier and a lot faster to tie, which is going to save you time, during a tournament. And we also noticed that the Alberto knot is definitely a smaller profile knot. Again, not allowing it to make as much contact with the guides coming out, and it doesn't have the tendency after a day of fishing to unravel. Remember with the FG knot, it's a lot longer. It hits the guides a lot more frequently, in my opinion, and eventually, after hitting those guides repetitive times, especially with like load casting, like if you're bomb casting, a spy bait or something like that, eventually that cinch knot or that half hitch or the multiple half hitches you're using, they're going to start to come undone. Once they do, that whole knot will just unravel, and that's the end of the day. I will say, typically, the first time it happened to me, I probably fished 3 days with the same leader, and it was just, you know, fun fishing, practicing around. But I have had it happen as quick as within a half a day. And again, that was practicing. So in conclusion, my opinion and the opinion of many other touring pros out there is the Alberto knot is a much more efficient, much more reliable knot. Thanks for watching.